Montana Territory, late July of 1879. The sun was high, the wind was dry, and Eliza Kittredge had not eaten in 2 days. She sat on the warped plank steps outside the dust-horn saloon in the rough-edged town of Red Bluff, her dress stained with dust and her boots worn through at the toes. Every time the Batwing saloon doors creaked open, she looked up with the same quiet plea in her eyes. Most men passed without a glance. A few tossed her a coin without slowing, like they were feeding a stray dog. "Madam, you cannot stay here all day," the saloon owner barked as he stepped over her for the 3rd time. "This is not a charity." "I am not asking for charity," Eliza said, her voice hoarse. "Just some bread." He walked off without answering. She pulled her shawl tighter, though the heat made it stick to her skin. She had come north with nothing but a threadbare satchel and a name she hoped someone might recognize. But no one had heard of a Lawrence Kittredge in Red Bluff, and the man who was supposed to meet her at the train stop never came. Now here she was alone, hungry, and humiliated. A horse's hooves sounded on the dirt road, slow and steady. She did not look up at first. Travelers passed through Red Bluff all the time. The last thing she needed was another man pretending not to see her. But this one stopped. "Madam," a voice said above her, low and clear. She lifted her head. The man on the horse looked down at her, his brow furrowed against the sun. He wore a dust-covered trail coat and had a rifle slung across his back. His horse, a dark bay with a scar across its shoulder, shifted beneath him but did not spook. "You all right?" he asked. She stared at him, unable to answer. Something in his voice was different. It was not pity. It was not disgust. It was concern. "I could use a little help," she admitted, clutching the satchel tighter. He nodded once and dismounted. He was tall, lean from the road, but not sickly. His eyes were the color of burnt amber and his jaw was lined with days of road dust and stubble. "I'm Keaton Cross," he said. "You got a name?" "Eliza. Eliza Kittredge." "You waiting on someone?" "I was. He never came." Keaton glanced toward the saloon, then back at her. "You got anywhere to go?" She shook her head. He looked at her for a long moment, not just at the dirt on her face or the holes in her shoes, but at the way her hands trembled from hunger and the way she tried to hide it. Without a word, he stepped closer and offered his hand. She stared at it. "You do not even know me," she whispered. "I do not need to," he said. "Get up. You are not sitting on the ground like a stray dog while men drink themselves blind behind you." Eliza hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His fingers were warm and calloused. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. He led her to his horse. "You ever ride?" he asked. "I have," she said, her voice barely above a breath. He lifted her gently, like she weighed nothing, and settled her onto the saddle. Then he mounted up behind her. His arm came around her waist, firm but respectful, and she felt the solid warmth of him at her back. "I do not know where you are going," she said. "I was not sure either," he said. "But I reckon we will figure it out." They rode out of Red Bluff as the wind picked up behind them, the town shrinking into dust. He took her to a quiet spot off the road, near a creek where cottonwoods swayed. There, he built a small fire and pulled jerky and biscuits from his saddlebags. She ate slowly, her hands shaking less with every bite. He said little, just watched her with a calm steadiness that made her feel like she could breathe again. When she finished, she folded her hands on her lap. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Keaton looked at the fire, then at her. "Because I could not ride past a woman begging outside a saloon like she was nothing." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you. You do not owe me thanks," he said. "You needed help. That is what people are supposed to do, help each other." Eliza stared at him, unsure what to say to a man like that. He broke the silence first. "There is a ranch about a day's ride north. Belongs to a friend of mine. They always need hands. If you want, I can take you there. You can rest. They will give you honest work if you want it." "And what about you?" she asked. He hesitated. I was just passing through. But maybe I can stay on a little while. Make sure you get settled. Eliza nodded slowly. I would like that. They rode again the next morning and the sun rose behind them. He let her guide the horse, one hand always steady on the reins just in case. They did not speak much, but it no longer felt awkward. There was something easier now, a quiet warmth between them that did not need words. That night, they made camp under the stars. She sat by the fire, knees drawn up, and watched him lay out bedrolls. You always ride alone? She asked. Most of the time, he said. Do you like it? He looked up at her, his eyes catching the firelight. I used to. She smiled just a little. And for the first time in days, she did not feel alone. He lay down not far from her, close enough to hear her if she stirred but far enough to give her space. Still, she felt safer than she had in months. Maybe years. As the fire crackled low, she whispered into the dark, I am glad you stopped. So am I, he said. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, she slept without fear. And just like that, her life began to change. By the time they reached the ranch, a thin haze had settled over the hills, softening the outlines of the scrub and rock. Eliza's legs ached from the ride, but she didn't complain. She didn't want to. The air smelled of grass and cattle, and somewhere nearby, a windmill creaked in rhythm with the breeze. Keaton led the horse through an open gate, waving once to a man tending a water trough. The man raised his hand back, but said nothing. Dogs barked from somewhere behind the barn, and two boys in canvas breeches ran past a coop, chasing a chicken that wanted nothing to do with their game. Eliza slid from the saddle before Keaton could help her, landing with a wince. Her knees nearly buckled, but she caught herself. You all right? He asked, stepping down beside her. I'll be fine, she said, straightening. A woman in a sun-faded apron stepped out from the porch, a flour-dusted hand pressed to her hip. Her face was lined, but her eyes were sharp. Keaton Cross, I swear you only show up when you've got someone in tow, she called. He grinned and took off his hat. You still owe me a supper for pulling your boy out of the ravine last winter, Aggie. That I do, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. But she looks like she needs it more than you. Eliza's cheeks flushed, but the woman was already coming down the steps. I'm Aggie Tolan. Cook, nurse, and occasional referee. You come from the east? Eliza nodded, unsure how much to say. Well, come on. I'll find you something clean to wear and something hot to eat. We'll sort the rest after. Keaton stayed back as Aggie led her inside. The house smelled of yeast and wood smoke. Eliza's fingers twitched toward the warmth of it all, the quiet clatter in the kitchen, a quilt draped over the stair rail, the sound of someone humming faintly upstairs. You married? Aggie asked, tone casual, not unkind. No, Eliza said. I was supposed to meet my brother. He never came. Aggie didn't press. After Eliza washed up, Aggie set a plate in front of her, beans, cornbread, and a thick slice of ham. She ate slower this time, not from weakness, but from the unfamiliar comfort of someone setting a table for her. Later, she found Keaton in the barn, brushing down his horse. The air inside was cooler, thick with the scent of leather and hay. You didn't have to bring me here, she said. He looked over his shoulder. I know. I could work, she added. I've done laundry, mending. I can help in the kitchen. You don't have to prove yourself to me. I want to. He nodded once and turned back to the horse. Aggie's good people. She'll put you to work if you ask. And you? You staying on? Keaton paused, then gave the curry comb one last stroke before setting it down. Wasn't planning to, he said. But something tells me I ought to. Eliza leaned against the stall rail. Why? He looked at her, then really looked, like he was trying to decide what she'd do with the truth. You remind me of someone I failed once, he said. I'm not aiming to do that again. She didn't ask who. Didn't need to. That night, Aggie gave her a cot in the loft and a pair of well-worn boots that almost fit. The barn creaked around her as she lay back, eyes tracing the slant of moonlight across the rafters. Below, she could hear Keaton moving, settling into the makeshift bunk near the tack room. She turned on her side, fingers curled beneath her chin. Keaton? She called softly. He didn't answer right away. Then, thank you for stopping. The quiet stretched, and she thought maybe he'd fallen asleep. Then his voice rose low and steady. didn't feel like a choice. She smiled in the dark, knowing this place wouldn't be permanent, but it could be something. A beginning, a place to mend what had been torn. And maybe, in time, she'd stop feeling like someone left behind. The sun had barely cleared the ridgeline when Eliza stepped outside, sleeves rolled, hair braided back with twine. Her hands still bore the ache of yesterday's work. She'd spent most of it hauling water, scrubbing floors, and mending saddle cinches by lantern light, but it was a clean ache, the kind that came from being useful. The ranch stirred around her. Someone whistled while shoveling out a stall. The distant thud of hooves sounded from where the cattle grazed beyond the west fence, and a girl's laughter spilled faintly from the root cellar as Aggie barked something about not dropping jars. Keaton was already by the corral, looping rope around a fence post. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but she knew he saw her approach. "You start early," she said, stepping beside him. "Always have," he replied, tightening the line. "Sun waits for no one out here." She watched him work, the way his fingers moved with quiet certainty. "You planning to ride out today?" He shook his head. "Figured I'd stay through the week. Tolan's got a bull gone lame, and I owe him more than a quick visit." "Do you owe everyone you meet a favor?" "No," he said, glancing at her. "Just the ones that matter." Eliza turned away before he could see the heat rise in her cheeks. She glanced at the barn. "Aggie said I could ride out with one of the hands today. They're checking the fence line up near Cotton Ridge." Keaton nodded slowly. "You sure? I didn't come here to be kept behind a washbin." He leaned against the post, arms folded. "You ride steady?" "Well enough." He tapped the fence rail with his knuckles, thoughtful. "Don't let Thomas talk you into chasing strays. He's reckless on a good day." "I'll manage." She started to walk off, then paused. "You always keep one eye on where people go?" "Only when I'm not sure they'll come back." He said it without weight, but she felt the words settle into her like something remembered. The ride out to Cotton Ridge took most of the morning. The land spread wide and gold around them, broken by scrub pine and the occasional hawk circling overhead. Thomas, a wiry man with sun-reddened skin and a mouth that never quite stopped moving, rode ahead, pointing out breaks in the wire and places where cattle had pushed through. Eliza rode behind, keeping her mount steady along the uneven trail. By midday, her thighs were sore, but she didn't complain. When they paused for water, Thomas offered her a strip of dried apple and asked where she was from. She gave him the name of a town in Kansas and nothing more. He didn't press. They returned near dusk, dust clinging to their clothes, the horses lathered and hungry. Keaton was in the paddock, helping Aggie's eldest string up lanterns. He caught her eye as she dismounted, and something shifted in his posture, relief, maybe, or the faint easing of a thought he hadn't spoken aloud. Later, after supper, she found him by the smokehouse, watching the horizon fade from copper to blue. The cicadas had begun their low drone, and the air smelled faintly of mesquite. "I didn't fall off," she said. He gave a slow nod. "I noticed. Thomas offered to teach me how to check shoes for stone bruises." "You trust him?" "Not entirely," she said. "But I trust myself more than I used to." Keaton looked at her then, not as someone to be protected or pitted, but as someone finding her feet. "You didn't used to talk much," he said. "You didn't ask much," she answered. He took his hat off, ran a hand through his hair. "You ever think about what comes next?" She tilted her head. "You mean after today?" "I mean after you're not just surviving." Eliza folded her arms, considering. "I'd like to own something, even if it's small. A garden, maybe. A place where no one can tell me to leave." He nodded, slow and thoughtful. "Land gives a person roots." She glanced at him. "And what about you? You ever stay long enough to put any down?" He didn't answer right away. "Then I did once." "And?" He looked out toward the darkened slope where the cattle dotted the ridge like shadows. "Didn't end well." She waited, but he didn't say more. She didn't press. Instead, she reached into her apron and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "Aggie gave me this, said it was left in a ledger box last spring. It's got my brother's name on the back." Keaton took it gently, held it up to the lantern light. After a long moment, he handed it back. "That's a supply list from a mining camp up past Helena. If he was there, he's not anymore." "That camp folded last winter." So he might be gone? He might be somewhere else. You want to look? I'll go with you. She blinked. Why? Keaton's voice was low. Because no one should go looking alone. She held his gaze, the silence between them shifting from tentative to steady. Then, without speaking, she sat beside him on the bench outside the smokehouse. The night pressed close, but it didn't feel heavy. Just quiet, like something waiting to begin. The rains came early that year, thin, slanted sheets carried on a wind that muttered low through the cottonwoods. By late August, the dust roads had flattened into slick clay, and the fields behind the Tolan ranch steamed in the mornings, heavy with scent from the churned-up earth. Keaton stood at the forge near the lean-to, sleeves rolled, sweat mixing with rain as he hammered a loose shoe back into shape. Eliza leaned against the side wall, arms folded, watching the way the iron glowed in the firelight before he plunged it into water. Steam hissed, and the scent of scorched metal rolled out into the damp air. "You ever think about rebuilding something?" she asked, her voice low, eyes on the cooling shoe. He didn't look up. "You mean like a house? Or a life?" "I'm not sure there's a difference." Keaton set the tongs aside, wiped his brow with the back of his wrist. "Used to think I'd put up a cabin someplace quiet. Build my own table, stack my own stove wood. Never got around to it. Why not?" He leaned on the bench beside the anvil, rain tapping the iron roof overhead. "Didn't stay in one place long enough? Always felt like I'd be borrowing the land." Eliza stepped forward, picked up the rasp, and turned it over in her hands. "You think roots only count when they're deep? Maybe. Or maybe I just never had someone to put them down with." The rasp clinked as she set it back. "I've been thinking about Helena." Keaton's jaw tightened slightly. "We'll go if you're sure." "I'm not," she said. "But I need to know. Even if the trail's cold." He pushed off the bench and stepped out into the drizzle. "We'll leave after the storm breaks. Should have decent trail weather by then." Eliza didn't follow him right away. She stood under the overhang, the rain dripping steadily from the eaves. Something inside her had begun to shift, slow and steady like the draw of a river pulling at old roots. That night, she helped Aggie skin potatoes while the youngest boy read aloud from a book with half the pages missing. The oil lamp flickered as the wind pushed against the walls, and for a moment, she let herself imagine a long table with a place set for her, not just out of hospitality, but out of belonging. Later, she found Keaton in the loft, kneeling beside his saddle, checking the stitching on the girth strap by lantern light. "You think he's still alive?" she asked. Keaton didn't answer right away. "I think if he's not, you'll still need to see it for yourself." She sat down beside him, close enough to see the threadbare patch on his shirt sleeve. "You were right earlier," she said, "about building something when you've got a reason." He looked over, eyes catching the lantern glow. "You got one now?" Eliza nodded once. "Maybe not all of it, but enough to start." He didn't press her for more. Just reached down, pulled his bedroll closer, and stretched out on the boards. She lay beside him, not touching, but near enough to feel the quiet weight of his presence. The wind outside settled into a hush, and the rain softened to a whisper against the roof. "You ever think we might not find anything in Helena?" she asked. "I've been through emptier places than that," he said. "Didn't regret going?" She turned her head toward him. "You ever regret staying?" Keaton's voice came low, almost lost to the dark. "Only when I left too soon." They didn't speak after that. The silence between them held something steady, something beginning to take root. Neither of them named it, but it was there in the shared breath, in the space between lantern shadows, in the quiet promise of tomorrows not yet written. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the night cool and still. And inside, without fanfare or declaration, something fragile and new settled in the space between them. The trail to Helena cut north through pine valleys and shale slopes, pushing them higher with each mile. They traveled light blankets tied behind the saddles, a canvas roll of bread and dried meat tucked in Keaton's pack. Eliza rode close behind him, her mare steady even through the switchbacks that narrowed against the ridgeline. By the third day, the air thinned, crisp and sharp in the lungs. They passed a burned-out cabin near a gulch where snow still clung in the shadows. Keaton paused there, studying the blackened beams without dismounting. "Lightning?" Eliza asked, nudging her horse beside his. "Could have been," he said. "Or someone left the stove burning too hot." She turned in the saddle, watching the silent ruin. "Do you think you would have stayed in a place like that? Built your own?" His jaw moved like he was weighing something. "Depends who I was building it with." They pressed on. Helena opened to them under a slate sky, the streets lined with brick fronts and the stink of ore. Miners moved like ghosts between the boarding houses, faces hollow from long months underground. Keaton led her past the assay office, the general store, and down a side street where the windows were boarded on the second floors. They found the mining clerk in a lean-to beside the livery, sorting through ledgers with fingers stained from lampblack and ink. "You remember a Lawrence Kittredge?" Keaton asked. The man squinted up at them. "Worked the Red Elk claim last spring. Quit after the melt. Said he was heading east, maybe Dakota. He leave anything?" Eliza asked. The clerk pointed toward a crate by the stove. "Left a coat and a Bible. Didn't take to the cold much, I recall." She crouched by the crate, lifting the worn book with trembling hands. Inside the cover, scrawled in a hand she hadn't seen in years, was her name. A note beneath it read, "If she finds this, tell her I tried." Eliza closed the cover. "He's gone," she said, not as a question. Keaton took the book from her hands and tucked it gently into her saddlebag. "He left it where someone might find it. That means he wanted you to." She stood slowly. "Then I'm done looking." They didn't linger. By dusk, they rode out of Helena, following the river east. The air was warmer that night, and the stars came out early. Keaton sat by the fire, carving a length of pine into a spoon while Eliza stitched a torn hem along her sleeve. "You always make things with your hands?" she asked, watching the wood curl beneath his blade. "Time on the trail gets quiet. I like to leave something behind." She set the needle down. "You ever think of building something that stays in one place?" He glanced at her. "I think I do now." They didn't speak more that night. But when he spread the blankets, he did it close beside her, and she didn't move away. By the time they returned to the ranch, the leaves had begun to turn. The cottonwoods along the creek glowed yellow, and the horses grew restless with the early wind. Aggie met them at the gate, wiping her hands on her skirt. "You find what you needed?" Eliza nodded. "I did." Aggie tilted her head. "You staying on, then?" Keaton looked to Eliza, and for once she answered for both of them. "Yes, we are." He helped repair fence posts through the fall, and she took to the gardens, coaxing the last of the turnips from the hardening earth. At night, they sat by the hearth with the Tolans, the children sprawled on the floor, the quiet rhythm of a home settling around them. One evening, as the first snow dusted the porch rails, Keaton brought her outside, a folded cloth cradled in his hands. He opened it slowly to reveal a small wooden box, carved with the same careful lines he'd used on the trail. "It's not much," he said, "but it's for you. To keep whatever matters." Inside, she found the spoon, smooth and polished, and the stub of her brother's pencil, saved from the satchel. She looked up at him, heartful. "You want to build something with me?" she asked. He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I already am." They kissed beneath the eaves, the snow drifting around them in soft silence. No grand words, no promises shouted to the sky, just the quiet, steady bond of two people who had come through the worst and chosen each other. In the spring, they married beneath the cottonwoods by the creek. Aggie cried through the vows. The Tolans strung wildflowers along the fence rails, and the children danced barefoot in the grass. Keaton built their cabin by hand, plank by plank, and Eliza planted the first seeds behind it, beans and squash and a single row of sunflowers. By summer, the porch was shaded with vines, and a cradle stood beside the hearth. Keaton carved toys when the evenings grew long, and Eliza read aloud by firelight, her voice steady. They lived without hurry, without fear. And in the quiet spaces between chores and seasons, they built something that held. Love, not spoken often, but shown always. And it lasted.